have something that's so exciting today. I have with me Victoria Crowder. She is actually a part of our group. She has published nonfiction works and fiction stories, and right now she's working on a series of 3 historical novels. She's been writing and teaching writing for over 30 years at the community level, high school, and University of Missouri at Kansas City, and the Kansas City Art Institute. Although a good bit of her career has been in writing and teaching nonfiction, she's currently writing this adult historical fiction fantasy series, and she uses a note box in her process of writing. So that's going to be our review this week. Instead of me going through a review of what we covered last week and how to use the note box, this week's review is a real person who is using it. So at this point, I'm going to change the view. So she's our star because she is. Okay, Victoria, tell us a little bit. When we were talking earlier, you said that you yourself were a writer mom. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that to get started?
Absolutely. I came out of, well, let me back up. I've written my whole life. I started journals and diaries when I was young. Writing was just always a part of what I knew my life would be. But of course, as a young person, you don't know what that's going to look like. So I started publishing pretty much right out of high school, but it was always nonfiction. Um, I did a lot of manuals, a lot of how-to things. I was a debater in high school and college, so I did a lot of evidence briefs, things like that. But all through college, I always had a fiction class going. So I was absorbing all of those things and not quite sure what I was going to do with it. I just knew I loved reading, and I knew at some point I would want to dive into that pool. But quite honestly, fear kept me writing nonfiction, which I could research, I could get the evidence, I could put it together in the argument. That's just how I'm wired, but secretly a library rat. So I started, let's see, and I went back and looked this up after we spoke just because I thought maybe the gals might want to know. And by the way, welcome, moms. I am one of you. I feel your pain. I have been there. And what I hope as I share my journey with you is that you will start to see either lifelines or bits of tools that you can put into your own belt that will help you get through the years that you're dealing with. My daughter just graduated from college, and my son is just a couple years younger than her. So I'm at the other end of the journey where I have my time back, I have my focus, my attention. I've gotten all of those things back because now my kids are their own people. So if I could only share one thing with you, it would be this. This won't last forever. Whatever part of the journey you're in, whether you're just getting started as a mom, or maybe, you've got kids in elementary or middle school, you're starting to get a little bit of your brain back. Um, Enjoy it for where you are in the journey and have faith that you will get to the other side of it, whether it's mom brain, it's unable to focus and get things done, or like Kathleen is walking you through how you can identify pockets of time that you can use. There are so many tools available that will help give you a lifeline on that journey. So that's what this is about, and that's what I want to share with you. So I started my novel in about 1998. My daughter was born in 01. My son was born in 04. I went back and I looked, and the last chapters that I wrote were over the summer of 03. So my son was born in February. So it was in the middle of that pregnancy that I wrote the last pieces that I wrote on the fiction novel I'm working on now. So that's a 20-year delta. I mean, wow, talk about being derailed. But what I did during those years, and I only know this in retrospect, I didn't know it at the time, but what I was doing is in my pockets of time, I was reading and I was researching and I was gathering information. And this is going to become critical when we get a little further in our conversation and talk about how the Zettelkasten was really a lifeline that launched me into the next phase. So all of the reading and the things that I was doing when my kids were young, that started to stack up. I did a lot of online teaching. I did a lot of face-to-face teaching. So I was writing curriculum. I was organizing and researching information for those projects. And I was doing a lot of other creative types of things. I had my own art business where I taught painting and jewelry making and embroidery for years. A lot of that was done online. And a lot of those touch points that you pass through on your journey seem like they're not relevant, but they are, because all of those things will be used in some way down the road as you continue your writer's journey. So it's so easy to get down on yourself and think, man, I'm not getting anything done. I'm not getting the words on the page. But especially as a mom, you have to be gentle with yourself and trust the journey. Trust that somewhere in your writer brain that you're collecting all of those tidbits that will be so needed later, and just trust that they'll be there when you need them. So as I moved into about 2018 through 2020, of course, the world went insane and we all got sent home. And that's when I really started to dig back into the pieces that I knew I would need for this book that I was absolutely committed to finishing. So I was gathering massive amounts of research and information for it because there's a historical aspect. It takes place in about 8 different timelines. So I was doing the historical research, what was Oklahoma like in the 1800s? When did Cornell University get its charter as a university? There was a lot of stuff that I was reading that was going to inform my story. And all of those things were getting packed into note cards and notebooks. The problem was when I went to grab that research to dig into the writing, I didn't always know where things were. Now, suffice it to say, I am a crazy organizer. I organize everything. I have a whole pile of colored markers on my desk, which I know you don't need. It's a want, and I always want them. Same thing with my note cards, lots and lots of note cards. Everything is color coded. So it was organized, but I was missing the next step, which is what the Zettelkasten brings. So we'll put a pin in that and we'll come back to that. But as I coasted into 2021, we treated ourselves to a long hunting trip. So I was completely off the grid for 10 days. That was what made the difference. I had no cell service. I had no internet. I had nothing except for a notebook and colored pens and nothing but time on my hands. And that's what made the difference. I think I'd have to go back and look. I wrote around 40 chapters on that trip, hand wrote them out on legal pads, which I don't have up here, they're downstairs. And that was what made the difference, because in the quiet of that space where I had no distractions, everything that I had packed in my brain for the last 20 years all of a sudden started clicking like tumblers in a lock. And characters were coming out, the story was coming out. It just all started falling into place on the timeline. So that's a little bit of the 10,000-foot view of how I got from starting this project in 1998-ish, having and raising my kids and taking a whole journey around the barn, and then landing back to where I am now, which is book 1 is finished, and I'm about halfway through book 2. I anticipate it will be a 3 to 4 book series to start with, but the more that I plan out and start to abstract, what can these characters do? What else can I throw at them? What can I do in this world? I think the world could get much bigger. So I'm not yet willing to commit beyond 3 or 4 books, but I think I could stay in this world for a while. And my tools are what's allowing me to track all of that and be able to come back at a moment's notice and grab a character or grab a story thread, lay out my cards, and jump right into the writing part. So that gives you the Reader's Digest version, I guess.
That's fantastic. You mentioned several times the Zettelkasten, or as my writer moms are more used to calling it, a note box.
Okay.
When you were sharing what you did, I was amazed by 2 parallel topics. One was how similar our methods were, and the other was how different they are. So I think it would be a lot of fun for our writer moms if you would share with us when and how did you discover using a note box, and what are some of the unique ways that you use a note box? Because I've never seen anyone do some of the things you do. It does seem like a lot of fun.
Okay, okay. So when I really got back into writing mode, um, I knew I was gonna need to up my organization game because a story that began as a small project, a single book, was quickly becoming characters that could have their own books and threads, story threads that I could think, okay, if I put a pin in this thread here in book one, once I get what I need done for book two, then I can pick this thread up in book three. And of course, I'm thinking, holy cow, how am I going to track all this? I mean, I have got some spreadsheets longer than my leg, and I'm a 6-footer, but that's not going to get it done. So I went online like you do at 2 a.m. when you're not sleeping, and I was looking for some way of aggregating and referencing all of my story world information. And of course, in my mind, I'm thinking card catalog. I worked at the library for quite a while out of high school, and I'm thinking I need a big card catalog, but I couldn't get past what did that look like? And I certainly didn't have anybody taking my hand and showing me how to implement it. So by some miracle of YouTube algorithms, when I searched, I wish I could remember the search term, but I think it was note card organization is the search term that brought me to Scott Shepper. And either the first or the second video that I watched was on his numbering system. And that's what sucked me in. From the moment I saw the numbering, I was absolutely hooked. But what's funny is he was making references and teaching his system about how to use the note box in order to pull all of your topics into one place and then expand and branch those topics out, all in relation to nonfiction work. But from the first video, I knew I could make this work for fiction. So I set it up in two, not two boxes, but basically two applications, if you will. The first one, I set it up exactly as Scott lined out with a traditional box that uses the academic disciplines, and you have your 6 main categories, and that's how you put your first set of cards together. The critical piece being when you create a card and you have all of your information on it and you're ready to file it, you already know where that card goes. That's critical because if you're in the heat of the idea and you've got your information down and now maybe you're ready to move on to the next story thread or the next character thread or wherever you're headed, if you have to stop in that flow and figure out, okay, this is going to be 7105 because that's that character's number. And then I'm going to need to add an A. If you're figuring those pieces out in the moment, you're going to lose this thread over here. So if you already know this goes 7150.5, you're going to put it there and you're going to go on to the next card, or you're just going to add it to your pile and deal with it later. Either way, having the system in place is a lifesaver, especially if you're in creative mode and you're writing and using your words. Stopping in that flow and switching over to creating your alphanumeric code so that you can code it into your catalog, that's hard to do when you only have a short amount of time and when you're running on mom brain, which is probably exhausted, not necessarily connecting dots like you would be if you were sharp. It's just really hard. So what I did was I created the main system and then I added a 7,000s, and the 7,000s are the numbering for this work of fiction. Whether it goes on to be 15 books or it ends up only being 3, everything for this book will live in the 7,000s. And so what I did was I went back and I picked up all of my characters and sat down with them, and every character got a card, and every character's card got a number. So now I know my main female character, she's 7110, everything that has to do with her goes there. And then I can divide up her world by the numbers and slot in other people in her life, slot in details from her character development, which I have a whole module on how to develop a character on a series of cards. That way, when you sit down to write, maybe you want to write about some backstory in college. I'm just going to grab my card or cards that detail out her college experience. I'm going to lay them out, and I have all of my raw data right there, and I can just start writing. So that's how mine functions. The quick overview is I have the main box, which is all real world, nonfiction, research and information that has informed what lives in the book, and then specific only to the book fiction items, which include characters, made up places, those kinds of things, live in the 7,000s.
That's really terrific. We're using a slightly different area. We're using the 4,000s, but it's just, it's
Okay.
like, it's so similar and it's different, but it has a lot of similarity into the ways that the two work. And so what I'm hoping you writer moms will see from this is that having a note card system is what's important. Having a system that makes sense to you is what's important. Having cards that you could reach quickly and find that speak to how you're writing is what's important. And then exactly the way you do it is not important at all. But Victoria,
Absolutely.
you have a couple of really fun things that don't live in your notebook. Can you
I
share with
do.
us those? I have never seen those before.
I do. So the last key piece to navigating the note box, which my box is right there behind me. That way, I like having it near, but not in front of me. If it's in front of me, it's always barking at me because it's all right there. I like it behind me. That way I don't have to always see it. But this is where I depart from the Scott Shepherd system. Rather than an index that is made up of alphabetized cards with keywords on them, my index is in a disc binder. So every letter of the alphabet gets a tab, and I'll go to C because it's pretty robust. And then every tab has its list of key terms on it. So that's in the upper left-hand corner. And then down towards the bottom, there's a second list. And those are character or story specific things. So every letter of the alphabet gets a page in the binder, and then everything is listed out on that page in no particular order, so that if I need to get some information about my character Charlotte, I go to C, I find Charlotte, she's 7120.2. I go to my box and I pull Charlotte's cards, and I have her backstory, all of her character development work that I've done, everything is right there for Charlotte. Now, when it comes to collecting information, I often work on the go. I travel a lot. So I needed things that I could have at hand that didn't take up a lot of space. So what I did was, first I created the Flash Bunny deck. These are Flash Bunnies. Now, for those of you that have been writing a while or know a little bit about plotting, plot bunnies is a conceit that authors use to talk about all of the crazy ideas that show up when they're writing that have to do with plot. Oh, hey, I could do this. Oh, hey, this character could do that. Those are plot bunnies. They multiply like crazy and they run off in every direction. Well, my process not only does that with plot, it happens with everything in the novel, especially now that it's grown into a multi-book project. I've got Flash bunnies running around all over the place. So I needed a way to collect those. So what I did was I took 3x5 cards and I divided them in half, right? So this is one card cut in half. I hole punched the corner and I just put them on a binder ring. And there's one color for every of my main characters. And then yellow and white are generic, that yellow and white can be anything or anybody. But this way, when I'm sitting at a stoplight and all of a sudden I see the people in the car do something interesting. And I think to myself, ooh, if my main character was driving and maybe thinking about this problem in the story, and she sees the person in the car next to her do that, she's going to have an idea. I'm never going to remember all that. So I grab my flash bunnies and I jot a note down so that I have it. And then usually once a week, sometimes every 2 weeks, I go through this deck. I take the cards out and I either expand them onto a large card, or sometimes they just get filed. They just get a number for that character. They get filed away. And then when I have time to do some more of that character work or that exploratory writing, I grab all the flash bunnies that apply to whatever that topic, that scene, that plot point, whatever. And I have them all in front of me. I can clip them together and take them with me if I'm going to write someplace else. Or I can just stick them in the box and ignore them until maybe they come back around or they figure into something, in the plot or the story. So that's how Flash Bunnies work. I encourage you to have a small, portable something, preferably not digital. I'm sure that Kathleen has schooled you on how this is an analog system, not necessarily digital. Now, there's lots of great digital tools, don't get me wrong. But more often than not, I have found if I'm someplace where I don't have a charger, or maybe I can't access my digital tools at that time, like I don't have my laptop with me or my phone's on 5% battery, this doesn't run out of battery. I never have to worry about it. It's always right there. Second caution is just recently, in the same month, my new laptop crashed. It was only 5 months old and I lost everything on it. And my backup hard drive failed and I lost 10 years worth of work. So trust me when I say that is extremely painful. So hard copies will never do you wrong. Always hard copy first, write by hand, even if it's notes, save and file those notes, and then go do your digital work. For me, I print everything out. So every chapter, every scene that I write gets printed out, and I have a filing system for that as well, which I talk about in my course. But essentially, I just file those things by plot point. So other small things, this I got at Walmart. Now, these cards are about the size of business cards and they were pre-punched in the middle. So this is like a little note-taking system. You can find it in the kids section. And since we're back to school time, this is a great time to look. But these are just some multicolored cards that, again, I can grab this little deck, throw it in my bag. It doesn't take up any room. It's not heavy and I don't need a charger. So I'm real keen on having tools that you can take on the go that don't need any other attention than your own. Then the last set that I'll show you is this little deck. This is Act 1, Act 2A, which is the first half of Act 2, Act 2B, which is the second half of Act 2, and Act 3. So this is the layout for a novel, right? You've got a novel in 3 acts, 1, 2 sections of 2, which is the mid part of the book, and then 3, which is the end. So again, I took my character colored cards, punched enough that I had, a good amount if I were out for a day or a week or whatever. And then I also did my tabs. So if maybe I'm thinking about plot that day and I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to fit this scene into this series of scenes working backward on a timeline? Well, I can take my little character cards and I can write out those things. And then I can think, okay, that I think is going to have to go in the second part of Act 2 because these things need to happen first. So just as I'm mulling over those plot ideas, sometimes I'm watering the garden or I live on a cattle ranch, I'm out feeding chickens, whatever I'm doing. If I'm mulling that stuff over in those few minutes that I have available, I might think, ooh, hey, I could put that scene in Act 2. So when I have a second to jot it down, I'm just going to go to my little Act 2 section and I'm going to stick that card in there. So I always have an organizing tool with me. So if I could give you a second piece of advice, it is whenever you have a moment to attack your writing, whether you're solving plot problems, you're thinking about these characters' relationships, you're thinking about this character and maybe doing some development on their points of view or what makes them angry or whatever you're doing, don't just jot that down in a book and think I'll come back to that later, because your resources are so limited when you're in your mom brain and you're trying to connect dots and put things together. If you already have a way to organize those things so that when you come back to them in a week or a month or whenever, then you know where to go to get that piece. And I can't overstate that, because I have, well, you can't really see here, but I have an entire bookcase of journals and notebooks and notepads and stuff. I couldn't tell you what's in any of it. I know there's stuff I need in there, but I couldn't get up and go find it. Whereas if I know that I need the history of hand embroidery from the late 1870s, I go right here to the embroidery section and bingo, I pull out my cards and I'm ready to write, or I'm ready to keep going down that road. So that's the key piece of organization. Kathleen tells a funny story about your Zettelkasten or your note box should function with its numbering system so that if somebody walked in and threw the whole thing on the floor, you can put it all back together. Number one, that thought is horrifying to me, the fact of everything running amok. So that's why I ring bind my flash bunnies and my other plotting cards together. I like to know they're going to stay in the same order, so I don't have to think about putting them back in order ever again. And then having that system in place so that as you're creating different pieces, whether you're world building, you're doing character development, you're working on plot, all of those things have a dedicated place already. And then when you need them, you know where to go to find them.
That is super fantastic, Victoria. I really appreciate that. I did hear you mention a phrase, in my course. Are you currently teaching writing?
Well, yes and no. It's developing literally as we speak out of the questions that people are asking me. As I said, I'm new to the Zettelkasten community. I've only been building my box for just a few months here. So I'm doing a lot of back work, a lot of archiving, just crazy furious note taking and whatnot. During that process, as I started talking to other writers that I know, our community, etc., people started asking questions because not really anyone else is doing what I'm doing. So since I'm retrofitting an existing system for nonfiction onto a fiction project, a lot of questions arose. So I started answering those questions in an online kind of forum academy format. So yes, a course is growing out of what I'm doing, but it's literally growing day by day, question by question. So ultimately, I would absolutely love to offer it. It's just being built as we speak. So yes, I will be making it available for anybody that wants that kind of coaching or that kind of leadership. It's just literally in the developing and growing stages now.
Thank you so much, Victoria. That might be of great interest to our community, those of you out here, because as you know, I don't teach writing. I am not a published fiction writer. I teach how to overcome the obstacles to your writing. And I assume that you already know how to write. Well, Victoria actually teaches writing, and she's got some great methods that I've gotten a chance to preview some of the stuff she's assembling in her online course. It's really exciting, including ways of organizing a plot. We talk about character traits, but the character traits that I'm teaching in this whole that we're about to launch into here all have to do with enabling you in that little moment of time that you've got to write to reconnect to the emotional impact of your story. So they're emotional trigger points. They're not a comprehensive mechanism for developing a character, but Victoria is teaching that. So when her course is ready, you can bet that I will have her back on to tell us more about it, and you will get links so that you can sign up for it. In the meantime,
For sure.
can my students respond to my emails? You know, my students who are on my email list, they get a weekly email, and they can always reply to that email, and it will come right to me. If they reply with questions for you, can I pass them along to you?
Absolutely. I would love to hear about your projects, what you're working on, how long you've been working on it. If you're stuck, like Kathleen said, I'm building this course so everything is broken down into bite-sized chunks because I know that time is critical. So being able to access the piece that you want to work on and knock out a little bit of work in a small amount of time is the key piece, which I totally understand. I took a detour away from my writing for almost 2 decades, which is crazy. Don't do that. Don't be me. But I was able to figure out how to get back into it. So what I would like to help you find or do is your lifeline through. And I firmly believe that between the organization that the Notebox offers for accessing and using what you need quickly and the other tools that I'm developing, which revolve around the 32 plot points, you can literally sit down. Maybe you've got the luxury of 30 minutes. You can sit down, go through the character development part, and start pulling those things out and say, okay, this fear is going to feed into this situation, and that can go boom right there on plot point 4. And now that's going to mean that the next piece is going to go boom, that's plot point number 7. And so it allows you to start putting, say, a fiction project together just out of the bits and pieces that you have little pockets of time to create. So ultimately, my goal is to give you the tools to be able to take those two things and jigsaw your project together. So yes, I do have my character development stuff is all up. So I will provide a link over to that. It's all free. You can download it, use it, whatever you need, scribble all over it. I don't care, but it's a great tool for those of you that are developing characters because it aggregates a lot of different ways of developing characters into short, single card bite-sized pieces. So you can sit down and say, okay, today I'm going to work on backstory. So where did she grow up with? Who were her best friends? What did they love about each other? What did they fight about? Okay, done. And that backstory gets filed away. And then the next time you have a minute, you can go to the next piece and be like, okay, I'm going to work on her hobbies, likes, dislikes, those personal taste things. Write it all out, it gets filed, job done. So the character development I'm really excited about because no matter where you are in your story, it's something that allows you to drop right in and start developing those things that will then inform your plot points. And again, that's just putting your pieces together on the timeline of the story. So I hope that will be very valuable.
Well, thank you so much, Victoria. This has been really, really delightful. I'm excited to work with your character plotting. It really feels to me like the two are going to be extremely complementary. I don't think we have much overlap at all. I think we're going to be adding dimensions to one another. I'm just thrilled. And when you send me that link, which I'm sure I will get before this video goes live, and it will be included. So look in the comments below. You will have, of course, you always get a link to subscribe to my email list, but you will also have a link to where you can see Victoria's character plot. Victoria, can I invite you back another time? I would love to talk
Absolutely.
before too long.
Absolutely. I would love to.
Okay,
I
so
really enjoy, just in a closing thought, I've really enjoyed getting to know the way that you are approaching the writing process. As you said, it's so different from what I do, but I think you're right. I think you're coming at it from a direction that informs the things that you need in order to write a good story. So I think between us, we've got something really special that is going to be a huge help, especially for those people that don't have a lot of time but have a lot of ideas. I think we've got something that's going to help.
Well, thank you so much. And so send in your questions. We'll collect them up
Mhm.
and then we'll invite Victoria back and we'll have another session. Um, and also, if you are out there, Victoria is a member of our group. She's a member of our class.
Mhm.
If you have something exciting that you want to contribute, reply to one of my emails and we'll interview you. Wouldn't it be fun to see what you have to offer our group? Because that's who we are.
Mhm.
We're just caring people who want to see writing happen. And I always tell you, I can't wait to see your book in print. And Victoria,
Yes.
I know yours will be up very, very soon. So thank you so much for joining us, Victoria, and just we'll be back here again soon.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.